Davante Adams and updating where we're at on that. He, of course, is still dealing with a hamstring injury. It seems unlikely that he'll play for the Raiders this week. And the question then becomes where he'll play his next game. And my feeling is the answer to that question is still the New York Jets. Now, as we've said over the course of the last few days, other teams involved in this are convinced that Davante Adams, and maybe Aaron Rodgers too, are trying to engineer a trade of Adams to the Jets. And the other teams involved, the Bills, the Steelers, have both inquired, are operating on the assumption that that right now is where he's most likely to wind up. Now, that is complicated a little bit just by the mere fact that that perception is out there. Adams initially went to the Raiders with his preferences. His preference was to be traded to a team with a quarterback he's familiar with. The two obvious teams that fall into that category are the Jets with Aaron Rodgers and the Saints with Derek Carr, who Davante Adams played with both at Fresno State a decade ago and for that single year in Vegas. The Saints cap situation may preclude them from being too involved in this. The Bills cap situation may wind up eliminating them too. And that really leaves you with the Jets and whether or not the Jets can find a middle ground with the Raiders. And if other teams feel like this thing isn't completely on the level, they may be reluctant to put a real offer in front of the Raiders, which means the Raiders have to be able to gauge his value and figure out what's fair without having a real bidding war for the player. Now, what would his value be? Now, I've heard the idea of a second round plus being thrown around out there. My understanding is the Raiders haven't specifically asked for anything, but they would like something significant in return for Adams, obviously. And the idea of a 2 plus something else is akin to what we saw in the Brandon Ayuk negotiation back a few weeks ago. That, of course, was involving a 26-year-old player who has the opportunity to be on your roster and be a major piece of your offense for the next half decade. That's not what Adams is right now. He turns 32 in December. And so I would say the more reasonable comps would be Stephon Diggs and Keenan Allen. Now, Keenan Allen was traded from the Chargers to the Bears in March. Stephon Diggs was traded from the Bills to the Texans in April. Allen went for a 4th round pick. Diggs went with a 5th rounder and a 6th rounder to Houston for a future second. So that was a 2nd round pick 1 year out, which if you add all of that up, it's roughly equivalent to the value of a 3rd rounder. Now, both Diggs and Allen had better numbers last year than Adams. You can argue, of course, that both Allen and Diggs had better quarterback situations. That's totally fair. But you're talking about two guys with similar numbers. Allen is 8 months older than Adams. Adams is 11 months older than Diggs, so they're all in the same age range. Contractually, really, if you look at the deals that they're signed to, Diggs wound up being in a contract year when all was said and done after renegotiation. Allen is in a contract year. And then you've got Adams, who has balloon payments in the next 2 years, which effectively makes this a contract year for him as well. So that's really what you're looking at is value right in that third or 4th round range. I can't imagine the Raiders would move him for a day 3 pick. So I don't know that a 4th rounder will get it done. I think the sweet spot is probably there at a 3rd rounder. Whether or not that's enough, whether or not the Raiders feel comfortable taking that for a player that they gave up so much for 1st and 2nd round picks just a couple of years ago, that remains an open question. But ultimately, I do think that Davante Adams winds up playing for the Jets.